Today Africa Podcast is a podcast series where we interview African entrepreneurs and professionals and share the stories behind their businesses. In each interview, we ask how they got started, how they grew, and how they run their business today. The stories are inspiring and also provide specific advice and insight into starting a business. By sharing these stories, we want to help others get started.
Welcome to another episode of Today Africa podcast, and our guest today is Oladimeji Kuforiji. He's an investment and startup lawyer, the founder of LawSavvy NG, a law firm providing strategic legal solutions to innovators and investors in the startup ecosystem. Oladimeji, you are welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very
Can you tell us a bit about yourself? Who is Oladimeji Kuforiji?
much. All right. Thank you once again. So as you've mentioned, I'm a lawyer with core focus on corporate and commercial practice, and I've been in active corporate and commercial practice since my core in 2016. Oh, funny enough, today is actually my bar anniversary.
Congratulations.
December 2016. And so that is like 9 years. According to the legal calendar, I'm 9 years post score. So, and ever since then, I've been in active corporate and commercial practice with core focus on startups, investors, and creative ecosystem in general. So that's a summary of who I am.
Can you share a bit about your journey into law and what really inspired you to specialize in tech, startup, and investments?
My journey into law, I'll say I grew up with, I have an uncle that is a lawyer, but he's in active litigation. So my early years, I've actually wanted to be, going to court and all. But so that was what really triggered, the whole law interest. But, while I was in the university, I think I had a way with technology and the entertainment space in general. I just find a way around it. So my mom worked as a secretary, so we always have computers and all these gadgets around. So that was like my very first foundational interest in how the computer works. So I figured out a lot of things on my own, graphic designing and all those things. So that was literally the few tech things that I was doing. So after being called to the Nigerian bar, because as I mentioned, my uncle is a lawyer, so I used to go to court. I honestly didn't really enjoy it, and I just wanted to do something entirely different. So my very first employment was as a business development executive, and I had to do a lot of things around managing websites, graphic designing because of my graphic design skills. So that made me more interested in the tech ecosystem. Um, so in 2018, I think I had a Google scholarship on front end web development. So I learned all the HTML, CSS, and everything. So I was actually planning on becoming a proper tech bro. Um, but it was, to some extent, very tedious, and I needed to merge my training as a lawyer and my interest in tech. And in
Okay.
fact, at the very early stage, I don't even really know that there is something called tech law, startup law. But as the ecosystem got bigger and young lawyers like myself started becoming knowledgeable about the space, so I just figured out that yes, this is what I want to do. I want to combine my interest in technology and my training as a lawyer to offer solution to people like me, founders in the tech ecosystem and the startup ecosystem in general. And because of a little bit of flair in the entertainment space as well, so you, um, yeah, this is it. Let's offer solutions to founders that are creating solutions, investors that are investing in these founders that are creating this amazing solution, and people in the creative space. So that is why we created LawSavvy.
You are a founder and you understand the challenges that comes with founding a business. So can you tell me the challenges that you faced in the early stage of founding your business and how you overcame them?
The challenges would be at first the fact that you have to do a lot of things alone at the very beginning, and the mistake I made at the very early stage is not getting the right mentorship because as I said, I had to like pick a lot of things on the way by myself. So that's a challenge that I faced, and it made the journey slow. And that's why I tell most founders, as you journey, make sure you work with someone that has done maybe close to what you've done, right? So it makes the journey
Okay.
faster. You learn from their mistakes, and you're able to move faster. Another challenge that I that I faced would be basically just getting started. I will tell you for
Okay.
me, LawSavvy was not even supposed to be a law firm. It was supposed to be
Okay.
LawSavvy. The initial idea for LawSavvy is supposed to be a legal marketplace. It's supposed to be a legal
Okay.
marketplace supposed to connect lawyers and people that need legal services. So initially, it's supposed to be where bunch of lawyers will just be on the platform and a client will, work on the platform. And a mistake that I made is I only knew front end web development, right? And that is another
Okay.
challenge, lesson to every founder. You cannot do everything on your own. So you need to work with people that have the expertise that you lack. So because I could not do the whole back end thing and everything, right? And honestly, I did not even really, I was not open to the whole knowledge of, oh, we can actually under raise fund. I was not really eligible in all those things at the very early stage. So I'm like, oh, I'm a lawyer. Let me just change this model to carving a niche as a lawyer and turning law service into a boutique law firm. So those are challenges that
Okay.
I've learned, and yeah, I think everyone should do something that will build a better company for themselves.
You are an investment and startup lawyer. So in your experience, what are the most common legal challenges that startup founders face and how can they proactively, overcome them or address them?
So let's start from me being an investment lawyer. So
Okay.
that's I was able to work with a venture capital firm, which actually opened my mind to the investor's mind, the investor space. So apart from um, working with startups, I've also worked with investors. And
Okay.
the important legal mistakes founders, make at the very early beginning. I believe that's your question, correct?
Yeah.
Um, so firstly, their legal documentation. Their legal documentation. Most founders, in my experience, surprisingly, most founders, let's even start with structure. Most founders don't understand the differences between the legal structures available. You find out that some founders are registering their business as a business name rather than a company limited by an LLC, a limited liability company. And the implication of that is no investors can come in with a structure that is a business name. Because a business name
Okay.
is more like a sole proprietorship. It's just like a small business that is not. But if you're looking at getting investors in, the appropriate structure should be a limited liability company, which allows you to offer shares and all. So founders make that mistake. Number two mistake. Most founders, in fact, most maybe accelerator company will, would advise that you work in pairs. You have a co-founder. And when these founders are starting this co-founding relationship, they miss the important part of not having a founders agreement, and
Okay.
that puts founders in a lot of mess. Because the implication of that is when you don't spell out the roles and responsibility of each founder, you don't spell out issues concerning vesting schedule, how the equities will be distributed, how the equities that are distributed will vest. So am I getting all my portion of shares immediately, or is it going to vest over time? We've had scenarios where one co-founder will decide to leave and the shares is still in the company because there is no founders agreement. Ideally, a founders agreement would have, state the terms that okay, if you leave before your vesting schedule, is either you forfeit your shares or only a portion of the vested shares will, to you. And every smart lawyer would also put clauses that um, like a buyback clause, right? So even when you are leaving, the company would have the right to buy the shares back. So they list all these things, and it put founders in a lot of relationship trouble, where the founder is no longer active in the company. One is actively putting work together, and the one that left will just have the mindset of, oh, I have a share somewhere. So those is a lot of trouble that we've witnessed in the space. Um, Also, um, general legal documentation, right? Your NDA, non-disclosure agreement, a simple service level agreement or employment agreement, you know, clear terms, clear obligations regarding whatever relationship you're entering into. You know, most founders make this mistake. And importantly, the mistake of regulatory compliance. Every industry is unique, and every industry or whatever business you're doing might require some certain licenses or approval. And you just see founders focusing on building the technology without getting all these necessary approvals and everything. And at the end of the day, might just be sanctioned with some heavy penalties and all those things. And it can even delay your investment process. Because investors, during investment, they would ask, there is something called due diligence. So they will check all your books, check everything. Do you have this? Do you have this license to actually operate this business you're doing? And if you don't have it, you have to now, they will say, oh, you have to go and get it. And getting it might take maybe 3 to 6 months, depending on the license. Wow, for you to get that license, which will invariably drag the investment discussion because you can't proceed because you don't have it. So generally, legal documentation, regulatory compliance, and the general corporate structure of the startup. These are things founders need at the very beginning and put in place.
When it comes to raising capital, either through debt or equity, what key legal aspects should founders prioritize to ensure they address the scrutiny that will come from the investors?
In raising capital, there's something called investment readiness. Uh, so getting your startup investment ready. So that whole process starts with the founders, putting something in place. There's something called a data room. So the data room is just it can be an online file, it can be in the cloud, it can be physical, that contains all the necessary documentation in terms of incorporation documents, material agreements, permits and licenses, any strategic agreement for partnership, your financial. So data room, we have the legal due diligence. We have legal due diligence and financial due diligence. So investors want to see that you have a good legal standing, and they also want to see that, oh, your financials are good in terms of your projection, in terms of if you are already making profits, they want to see your books. Okay, how much are you actually making, and what is the projected amount that you can make in 2, 3, 5 years? So when when preparing for fundraising and capital raise, as the case may be, the founders would put all this documentation in place. So that guides them on where they are and how much they really want to raise. And basically, that is what the investors would check in terms of scrutiny. So there is a data room checklist that lawyers provide to startups, when they are doing this process. So they just check all the list and everything. Do we have this? Do we have that? What are those that we don't have that we can put in place? So you populate the data room and share with the investors. So the investors look through, confirm you have a legal standing, confirm the ownership of the companies, the guys behind it, your financial does it look good, and if it's fine for them, they proceed with issues surrounding, okay, what how do you value yourself? What's the company's valuation? If we give you X amount, how much are we getting in return? Basically, that's how the process goes.
Reading and from content on social media, I've come to realize that many founders register their their companies or their holding companies in some jurisdiction, and you seems to be helping these founders do this registration. So I want to know what are the benefits and potential pitfalls of these decisions of registering my company or founder registering their company in some jurisdictions.
The ecosystem, one way or the other, just you know um, grew into choosing some preferred jurisdiction to house their investment. So these jurisdictions, they are called, so from a tax perspective, they are called tax haven jurisdiction. So these jurisdictions are not heavy on taxes and everything. And examples of this is, we have Delaware, which is the most popular one. Delaware, we have BVI, British Virgin Islands, we have Cayman Islands, some startups use Seychelles, um, Estonia. Yeah, those are the ones that are coming to my head now. But the most popular one is Delaware. And the reason for this is, so the majority of investors, you know, have grown to build more comfort with that jurisdiction. And in terms of their legislation, their courts, in terms of the tax, for example, the founders are only expected to pay something called a franchise tax, which is just annually, Sim- similar similar to like the common annual returns that we file here in Nigeria. So that is the reason um, founders have founders and investors generally have chosen these jurisdictions to be the investment company or the holding company of the case may be. Implication, I don't really think there is implication because
Okay.
the benefits outweighs implication. You are able to house your investments in those jurisdictions. You are able to, especially when you are raising funds from global investors, right? So if you are in Nigeria and you only want to invest, you only want to raise your funds from Nigerian investors, fine, you don't have to trouble yourself with stress of having a Delaware. But if you are looking at getting investment, most particularly in foreign currencies, in dollars, or you are looking at getting investment from investors outside your jurisdiction. So these investors prefer to have their investment out in a company that is in a fair jurisdiction. So we've seen cases where investors from China are investing in a Nigerian entity, but they won't invest it in the Nigerian entity. The investment will go to the holding company, which is most likely registered in Delaware. You know,
Okay.
is the investors more comfort, right? So there is no issue of evaluation or legislation or anything. So it gives the investors comfort and it gives the startups a good standing, right, to get funding from investors from foreign jurisdictions. That is why they choose.
Intellectual property is critical for many startups. So, what steps should founders take to ensure that their IP is protected, especially in tech-driven and creative industries?
For startups, so in general, intellectual property could be trademark, patent, copyright, trade secrets, and all, trade design, and all those things. But the most popular one, copyright, trademark, patent. As you mentioned, IP is very, very important. And from the early beginning, something as simple as your brand name, brand logo should be registered. And the danger of not doing this is the law recognizes a first come first served basis, right? Except your brand has become very popular, and trust me, at the very early beginning, you're still dragging, you are not popular anywhere. So the law recognizes a first come first. It is first to register. So perhaps you make the mistake of not registering, and ideas. I think ideas are they are in the air, right? You figure out that what you're coming up with is actually not so secretive that nobody else will think of it. So someone in another division can actually be thinking of, the same thing. It's like this Marvel fiction multiverse. There is like another you in another country thinking the way you're thinking, that is thinking of the same idea. So it makes more sense when you're fast enough to register yours first. So you are protected. So even if the person launches, right, yours is first to be registered, so nothing would happen to it. And intellectual property is also so important that you want to register things like trademark, you want to register patent. So patent deals with whatever novel invention that you've created, for the startup. Maybe there is a new an entirely different line of codes or anything, you want to register that. And most importantly, what most founders, the mistake they make, because you are not just protecting yourself from the public, you should actually protect yourself from your own people, your employees. So every
Okay.
startup signs something called a confidentiality and intellectual property assignment agreement. So what this does is, at the very early stage, um, let's say your technical person, the person building the app, building the product, can actually be an external. It can be outsourced. So when you don't make the mistake of signing a CIPA, the tech guy can just wake up one morning and like, oh, I don't like the way you're treating me, blah blah blah. I'm going, and like that, he's gone with the product. Maybe a UI UX person, he's gone with the entire design, and you have to start from scratch. And you're like, whoa, I designed it, it is mine. Oh, I built the product, it is mine. I'm not surrendering it. I want to use it for somebody else. But when we've actually seen very weird situations like that. Very simple way to solve that type of problem is to sign an intellectual property assignment agreement that says whatever you're building at this stage, whatever you're designing, whatever work you are doing in the course of your engagement with the company, you have assigned it back to the company. So it is not yours. It is not yours. So that way you are protecting yourself from internal trouble. So these are
Okay.
things that need to be put in place in terms of intellectual property. Very, very important.
You help people to draft and review their contracts for both founders and investors. What are those elements that people or founders seems to overlook that could pose risk to their startup in the future?
Very, very great question. And and they actually need to hear this because most of these guys, there is only one clause they are particular about. That's the consideration or the payment clause. How much is the man paying me? How much is the investor paying me? They are fine with that. They miss out very important clauses. Let's even start from obligations. Obligations. What would I be doing? Okay, after collecting this money, what am I supposed to do? There are clauses around, oh, you're actually supposed to give some periodic reporting. Um, there are things that are called condition precedence and condition subsequent. So condition precedence, you have to do it before. Condition subsequent, you have to do it after. And there are some condition precedence, condition subsequent that can be tied to the validity of the contract. So there are some conditions subsequent that can say if you don't do this within so time, it will be seen as a breach of the contract, and the contract becomes void, right? So there are some conditions subsequent that would say if you don't maybe get this license or make this certain appointment or do so based on the timeline that you've been given, maybe they are revoking the license or there will be some penalties. So those things are very, very important. Also, dispute resolution. Let's go to the tail end. Dispute resolution. How, so if anything happens, how would disputes solve? So a good dispute resolution clause should look at negotiation and settle it amicably. A good dispute resolution should look at, okay, if we are unable to settle it amicably, are we looking at mediation or are we looking at arbitration? Where will be the seat of the arbitration? So are we doing it in Lagos? Are we doing it in Abuja? Is that convenient for both parties if any issue comes up? Okay, would the arbitration be the final thing or we still have to go to court? So those things need to be clear out, right? So it becomes messy. It is when the issue now happened that everybody is now going back and forth. That no, you have to come to Port Harcourt to resolve this matter. You have to come to you have to fly over to US to meet to resolve the matter. But when we have it in an agreement that okay, this is the jurisdiction that we've chosen for dispute, this is how it's going to be handled. We are only appointing one arbitrator. Each party is going to be responsible for the fees of the arbitrator. Those things need to be clear. Imagine maybe the aggrieved party now say, oh, we are appointing an arbitrator, and an arbitrator is collecting so millions, and the other party will be like, oh, hey, you are the one that want to go to court. You are the one that is dragging this thing. I don't have any money to pay anybody. So those things, yeah, they can be very messy if there are issues. So um, it needs to be clear. Um, other other terms can be around termination of the contract. How do we exit? What happens if I decide to leave? So these are common in contract like SLAs, service level agreements, or independent contractors agreement, or a master service agreement, stuff like that. So how do we exit this relationship? Because every agreement is creating a relationship. So how do how do I? What is going to happen? Am I giving you a 30 days notice? So after the 30 days notice, um, do I need to submit something back to the company? What happens if you are owing me after exiting? How do I get my money back? If I'm exiting before the completion of the service and I've actually paid you in full, how are we going to calculate how much I supposed? So those things are very, very important. What happens after termination? How do we terminate? And what happens after termination? How do we, you know, exit this relationship without any tussle? They are very important. Simple plus is also as defining the relationship of the party. Are we agents? Are we partners? Or are we independent contractors? So we've seen situations where people will be like, oh, we have an agreement with these people, and they will start speaking with, the clients or customers of the people that they have agreements with. So the relationship needs to be clear. See, you are just an independent contractor. You are only employed for this certain service, and upon completion of the service, we are done. You are not expected to do something in my name behind me. If there is anything that needs to be done, you need to get my consent first. Clauses around non-solicitation, non-compete, it needs to be clear. So because we are in agreement, and most likely this agreement will open you to some level of trade secrets in my business. You are not expected to now go and open another business exactly like my own that will be in competition with me. So things around non-solicitation, non-compete. So non-solicitation means, going behind me to maybe solicit for my employees or solicit my client to move them to your own side. Pricing, um, payments. How are you making payments? Are you making it in full? Will it be in tranches? Will it be milestones? So those things need to be clear. So it's not just this is how much I'm receiving, this is how much I'm collecting. That's all. There are a lot of other things that need to be routinized, during your contract stage.
Instead of grow, the governance equally increases. The governance becomes important. So, what best practices do you recommend for maintaining strong corporate governance as businesses or as a business expand?
So depending on the industry, so there is actually um, in Nigeria and in other jurisdictions, we have a corporate governance principle, and what this principle or whatever code of conduct surrounding it promotes is transparency, accountability, fairness, and the likes. Right? Yeah. So what's the in fact even at the very early beginning, there are some investors that at the very early beginning they want to see your corporate structure. For a growing startup, um, establishing a good corporate governance is very important. And how you do this is one, in terms of your decision making, you want to set up a proper board structure. So you want to have directors in the company. You want to establish your board. Your board can be a three, five, 7-man board. Um, so for your decision making and all. And you want to have an independent person on the board, someone that is not into the day-to-day running of the company, someone that can give an independent, you know, non-biased opinion about the decision you're making in the board. There is also something called an advisory board. These are things investors want to see that you actually have, right? And you have experts on board, right, that can advise, the journey of the company into making the right decision making, um, to make the right decisions, right? Either financial decisions, legal decisions, business decisions, generally decisions pertaining to risk. So you want to have experts know those concerns on your board. Um, Also, in terms of corporate governance, the relationship of the shareholders, it needs to be defined. What are the rules? What are their rules? What are the rules of members, the founders? If you are a CTO, you are the CEO. It's important everyone have understand their roles and responsibility, and be accountable, for those roles. So things like that are very, very important. We've seen investors, ask for during the due diligence stage, they would actually ask for, your corporate governance structure in place. You have a board, and this is because most of the time now in the ecosystem, investors, angel investors or some venture capital firm would actually ask for a board representation, right? So I don't just want to give you my money. I want to be on your board to actually oversee your decision making. So um, in recent times, we now have investors getting observer seats on board, or getting a representative that will be appointed as a director in the company that would actually attend company meetings and all those things. So imagine you've actually not even set up anything. And whoever the appointing will be sitting on nothing. So those structures need to be put in place. And for more established startups that are regulated, um, regulated by the CBN or SEC. So maybe for the fintech guys now that are getting some payment license from CBN or getting investment licensing from Securities and Exchange Commission, corporate governance is not even negotiable. Having a good corporate governance structure is not even negotiable because you will be filing reports on your corporate governance structure. It's a very important um, stuff to put in place for every company.
What key lesson have you learned over the years in your journey as a startup and investment lawyer?
Have a mind to learn because the startup ecosystem, you know, they, well, in my own, I don't know the curriculum now. They didn't teach us in school. Though they will teach you the basics, contract, intellectual property, but how the ecosystem actually works, things around funding, things around accelerators, things around, you know, advising startups is not in the university curriculum. So for young lawyers, you need to open to, learning, make the and the beautiful thing now is that there are more content now than before. There are more content now than before. And I think there are a little bit more startup lawyers than before that you can learn. And be learning, just learning. Be very open to learn and just figure it out. You know, make research, ask questions from mentors.
What legal strategic advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs who are launching their startups?
Well, from a legal standpoint, um, most importantly, do not ignore the legal issues from the very beginning. Um,
Okay.
I think about it now. The simple co-founder relationship, even at the idea stage, get a lawyer involved. Have some sort of partnership agreement or a founders agreement, even from the idea stage, even from the point of picking a name for that brand. I'm telling you, you want to document everything right. You want to pay attention to your legal documentation. You want to pay attention to your structuring, how you structuring the company, um, how you protecting your intellectual property, um, regardless of whoever come up with the name, regardless of whoever come up with the idea of the business, all of you must assign it back to the company. It shouldn't be owned by any individual, not even the founders. So
Okay.
everything should be assigned back, you know, to the entity itself. And take your time in terms of building the product now. Take your time to actually understand your market, understand the product you're building. Um, ensure you build a solution that actually works. Identify the market, right? Don't build a solution and look for customers that will buy. You know, understand the pain points of your existing customers. What do they need? Build a product to solve the problem that they have.
Today African Podcast is a podcast series where we interview African entrepreneurs and professionals and share the stories behind their businesses. In each interview, we ask how they got started, how they grew, and how they run their business today. The stories are inspiring and also provide specific advice and insight into starting a business. By sharing these stories, we want to help others get started.